According to the Court of Auditors, the controversial asylum pact to deport irregular migrants to Rwanda is costing British taxpayers up to £500 million. This is significantly more than was previously known. The Conservative government had so far confirmed costs of £290 million, but refused to say how much more money London had promised Rwanda. The opposition reacted angrily to the estimates. This report exposes the national scandal that the Tories are trying to cover up. That was said by Labour Domestic Affairs spokeswoman Yvette Cooper. She stressed that only 1% of asylum seekers would likely be sent to East Africa on a few symbolic flights if the plan ever comes into force. With the asylum pact, which critics say violates human rights, Prime Minister Rishi Sunak wants to deter irregular migrants from entering Great Britain. Anyone who comes into the country without the necessary papers should be flown to Rwanda regardless of their personal circumstances and can apply for asylum there. A return to Great Britain is not possible. To this end, Sunak wants Rwanda to be declared a safe third country by law. However, the corresponding draft is met with resistance in the upper house. As the Court of Auditors have now determined, London will pay Kigali £50 million each in addition to the £290 million already paid this year in 25 and 26. Once the first 300 migrants arrive in Rwanda, a further £120 million will be due. For each asylum seeker, an additional £150,000 is charged for accommodation, food, training and healthcare. And this includes £11,000 and flight costs per person. £12.6 million is earmarked for training security forces to start with and £1 million a year thereafter. The Interior Ministry justified the cost. It would be more expensive to do nothing and continue to accommodate migrants in hotels for a lot of money. That's at least what a spokesman said. But his friends, the rich in British society, are also currently making headlines as a problem for Sunak. At 7.3%, British inflation in 23 was significantly higher than in the Eurozone. The Bank of England is increasingly worried about losing control over inflation. The rich Brits don't care much about the high prices, and they drive inflation in one area in particular. Star menu with champagne, tickets for the popular West End show, and skiing in Valais at the weekend. Britain's wealthy can still enjoy themselves despite rising prices and higher interest rates. And this lack of price sensitivity is increasingly becoming a problem in controlling inflation. That was a warning from Catherine Mann, that's a member of the Bank of England's Monetary Policy Committee. Despite significantly higher mortgage interest rates, people with high incomes still have enough liquid funds to treat themselves. They would use this to a disproportionate extent for travel, dining out and entertainment, as Mann said on February 28th at a Financial Times conference in London. Inflation in the services sector therefore remains persistently high. The Bank of England's goal of a price increase of 2% remains difficult to achieve despite an easing in energy prices and a stabilization in many product groups. Consumers regulate what companies set as prices. They can no longer pay for it or they choose not to, explained Mann. But since this mechanism does not apply to some categories and there is no reluctance to buy despite higher interest rates, this makes the central bank's job difficult. Inflation has affected Great Britain more significantly in recent years than many other European countries, with price increases being 1 to 2 percentage points higher than in the Eurozone. Consumer prices rose by 7.3% last year compared to the 5.4% in the Eurozone. And the country is now well away from its highs. The inflation was 11.1% in October 22, and in January prices rose by 4%. But price increases are higher in the services sector. In January it was 6.5% after 6.4% in December. It is important to look at services because this primarily reflects domestic price pressure, especially wage developments in the sector. That was said by Paula Bejarano Carbo, the economist at the National Institute of Economic and Social Research. Services inflation can therefore tell us about domestic price pressures. That it remains so high suggests that underlying domestic inflationary pressures remain an important risk to consumer prices, she said. The central bank should only expect to cut interest rates when it's sure about it, so that it does not have to raise interest rates again after cutting them too early. In this context, members of the Monetary Policy Committee have repeatedly referred to the comparatively high service inflation. And Munn, the chief economist at Citi until 21, is one of the hawks on the Bank of England committee. At the last meeting in January, she voted for a further increase in interest rates. The majority voted to keep interest rates at 5.25%, though. In its own forecast, the central bank assumes that inflation will reach the target value of 2% in the second quarter. By the end of the year, it is expected to rise again to 3% when the dampening effect of lower natural gas prices subsides. Because of different consumption habits, inflation affects different income groups differently, of course. And according to data from NISA, the 25% of households that are in the worst financial situation have suffered a loss in living standard of around 20% since the pandemic. In real terms, they have around £5,000 less available per year. And in the best-off group, the loss is less than 5%. But Britain is also still causing trouble for Brexit. But could Brexit be softened at EFTA? Free trade, yes. Political integration, no. To compete with the EU's predecessor, the European Economic Community, the EEC, Great Britain and 6 other European countries founded the European Free Trade Association EFTA 60 years ago. The founding act was signed on January 4th in 1960 in Stockholm. Of the once 10 member states, only 4 remain now. That's Iceland, Liechtenstein, Norway and Switzerland. And EFTA vigorously courted Britain after the Brexit vote, but in vain. Our government has clearly spoken out against joining EFTA, emphasized Jane Owen, the British ambassador in Switzerland, to a Swiss newspaper. Some of the EFTA's 29 free trade agreements are outdated, and we have the ambition to negotiate broader and more modern agreements directly and not through EFTA, said Owen. In addition to Great Britain, the former members Denmark, Austria, Portugal, Sweden and Finland had also joined the club of other Europeans over the years. After the collapse of the Eastern Bloc, the European Economic Area was created, in which the rules of the European internal market also apply to the EFTA states, with the exception of Switzerland. The EFTA countries have a total population of 14 million. After Great Britain's planned withdrawal on January 31st in 2020, the EU still has around 450 million inhabitants, and the EFTA states conduct around 2/3 of their trade with the EU. According to EFTA, total exports to the EU amounted to almost 194 billion euros in 2018, and imports from the EU amounted to 171 billion euros. So despite the big leaving of people from EFTA, it is still there. But of course, this is not one of the choices for the British to choose, because then they would have to accept the EU rules without having a say in it. And they would be much worse off than before. That's why so many members switched from EFTA to the EU in the end and are just normal EU members. But the topic comes up from time to time, so I thought I'd quickly give one comment about this in one of my videos as well. And if you want to see more, the next video is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.